Hello everyone, in this video we are going to see how to create buttons for our web page, and we are going to see some positioning techniques for our particular element. And let me proceed further into the topic. At first I am opening our project folder and Visual Studio Code Editor together like this, and I want to create one button generally as to make a comments on my entire web page, right? I want to create one button at the bottom of my page. For that I will use button element. Okay, for creating buttons in our general HTML file we will use button element like this. We're gonna use button element. Within the button element you can give the any text, right? Like I am giving comments here. You can add some symbols to your text, like if you are using Windows operating system you can use the shortcut key in your keyboard as hold the window key and press dot symbol in your Windows. That gives you an emoji box. Okay, when you are pressing Windows button with dot symbol it gives you a emoji box. In here we can use any of the emojis. Okay, we can use a bunch of emojis in this box. And if you are using Mac operating system you can use control and space. Okay, hold the control button and press the space. Okay, that is the shortcut key to open emoji box in our Visual Studio Code Editor. Basically this is not a functionality of the Visual Studio Code Editor, or it is not any extension for this code editor. This is general functioning of the operating system. Okay, it is not any special extension for our Visual Studio Code Editor. Okay, and here I will use some symbol like this symbol. Okay, I am gonna use this symbol. I am giving a save, and if I give a refresh over here you can see here, the button will be added at the bottom of my page. Okay, this is the thing I want to add to my web page. Okay, if I gonna give some special features to this button, like I will use button element selector here, and if I give some font size to my button as 20 pixels, and I gonna give some padding to my button which increases the space within a particular element, and I am giving 20 pixels too. If I give a refresh, see, I think it is very larger. I'm gonna decrease the padding to 10 pixels. If I give a refresh, okay, this is the how I want. Okay, this is the thing how I need, and let me decrease the thing to 15 pixels. Okay, this is how you can create buttons to your web page. But I want to position my button at the right corner. Okay, at the right corner of my web page. For that you need to know some position properties, right? You need to have a basic knowledge on position properties, which includes the CSS layout, right? Generally the position property specifies the type of positioning method used for a particular element. Let me give you a quick example for my position property by taking one extra line in our HTML file. Like I will use div element here, which is not a semantic HTML element, but I will make use of it here for your quick example. And I will use some text like sample text position layout or position property. Okay, this is the sample text I am giving to my HTML file to give you an understanding on position property. Okay, the thing that you need to understand here is generally the position property specifies the type of positioning method used for a particular element. We can give 5 different types of values for our position property. Like we can give this position property as static, relative, fixed, absolute, or sticky. Let me give you a quick review on all of those values by going to our CSS file. I am taking this file. If I give element selector for my div element like this, and the one thing that you need to keep in mind is when you use position property, that means elements are positioned using the top, bottom, left and right properties. Okay, however these properties will not work unless the position property is set first. Okay, they also work differently depending on the position value. And if I give my position for this div element as I am using position property, if I give position as static, okay, I am using static position here. Okay, as a value I am giving static for my position property, and I will include one border to give you a good representation about the position property. I am using border with 3 pixels, and I will use solid border. I will use general black color which gives a shorthand notation of the hexadecimal notation. Okay, this is the thing I want to picturize you to give you a better representation of the position property. Here we are creating one sample element here. For the sample element we're gonna look how the different values for the position property working on. Okay, here I will use from position property. At first I am giving my value as static value. Okay, that means static position elements are not affected by the top, bottom and the left and right properties, right? An element with position static is not positioned in any special way. It is always positioned according to the normal flow of the page. For example, if I give a refresh over here, see here, the thing will be as it is like the normal flow of the page. Here the static value describes that positioned elements are not changed in a special way. It is always positioned according to the normal flow of the page. That means, and in simply we can also make sure that if I remove this, there is no change in our general div file, because if I remove this, if I give a refresh, see there is no change in this element, right? That is due to here the point that you need to keep in mind is HTML elements are positioned static by default. Okay, HTML elements, every HTML elements are positioned static only by default, and if I include position with static here, there is no change because by default the HTML elements are positioned by static. Okay, if I changed my position value for the relative, if I change my position value as relative, a element with relative position is position relative to its normal position. That means if I give relative here, I want to set my relative position left as, for example, I will use 30 pixels. Okay, to give you a better understanding. And if I give a refresh now, that means here that you need to keep in mind is setting the top, left, right or bottom properties of a relative position element will cause it to be adjusted away from its normal position. Okay, when I going to maximize this folder, see here, this is the entire body, right? This is an entire body. With this entire body we are gonna give some relative positioning, like I will apply some left positioning as 30 pixels. Setting the some properties of a relative position element will cause it to be adjusted from its normal way. This is the normal position, right? This is the normal position for this element, and we are giving some left values, right values or any values. Based on those values it will be positioned. That positioning is nothing but relative position. Okay, this is the general thing that you need to know about the relative positioning. And if I give my position value as fixed position value, okay, fixed position value, I am giving this value as fixed position value, and I want to make this thing as bottom as 0. Okay, bottom as 0, and my right positioning as 0. Okay, and I want to specify some width for my element as, let me take 300 pixels of width and take the border as it is like that. And if I give my position value as fixed, that means an element which position value as fixed is positioned related to the viewport, which means it always stays in the same place even if the page is scrolled. Okay, when I give a refresh, if you see here, I am giving the position as fixed. That means I will fixing my position of the element, right, with the property of bottom 0, right 0. That means we are giving the bottom value as 0. That means we are attaching this element to the bottom extent of the page, and we are giving the right as 0. That means we are fixing the sizes of the right margins as 0, and I am giving some width as 300 pixels. That means I want to position this entire element with this 300 pixels. That means I am fixing the entire dimensions of this particular element, right? If I scrolling my page, the position of this particular element will be as it is like that. If you observe carefully when I maximize it, see here, for this entire page the position of this element is here only. That means we are giving the bottom as 0 and right as 0, and we are giving this entire element width as 300 pixels. Okay, when you scroll down the page or scroll up the page, the position of this particular element will be fixed. That is the meaning of this fixed value. And if I going to give my position value as absolute, okay, I am using absolute value for my position property. And here the thing is, an element with absolute positioning is positioned related to the nearest positioned ancestor. That means instead of position related to the viewport like fixed like this, we can use nearest positioned ancestor. However, if an absolute positioned element has no positioned ancestors, it uses the document body and moves along with the page scrolling. I will make some changes in these properties, like I will use my top element as for 100 pixels, and I gonna use my right element as 0 pixels, right property as 0 pixels, and width as it is like 300 pixels. And I want to include another property with height, right? I want to include height for this particular element as, let me say, 150 pixels, right, off of the width. Okay, these are the general properties I have included for my div element, and I will use here value as absolute value. Okay, for this value, if I give a refresh over here, if you see the changes carefully, see here we are giving the properties as top as 100 pixels. See here, this is the positioning, absolute position of our element. That means if you see here, the top positioning is 100 pixels. That means we are giving the top has 100 pixels and right as 0. That means we are setting this entire thing to the corner, and width as 300 pixels and height as 150 pixels. If I remove this height for your simplicity, you can see the change. See, this is the use of the absolute value for our position property. And the difference between the absolute and the fixed position is, if you are using fixed value to your position element, when you scroll down the page or when you leave the particular space, it will be fixed at that dimensions, right? At that particular dimension it will be fixed. And if you are using absolute positioning, means in this absolute position the dimensions are fixed, but it cannot be follow up you when you scroll up the page. That means we are fixing the position here only. Okay, this is the general thing about the absolute positioning. And the another note point that you need to keep in mind for this absolute positioning is, absolute positioned elements are removed from the normal flow and can overlap the elements. Okay, these are the general positioning values that I have to include you in this video, in addition to learn about the buttons. Okay, because we want to make sure that the position of the button should be absolute or relative. Okay, based on our general format of our page. And just now I will removing this thing, I don't need it. Okay, this thing also I am removing from it here and making it in a comment. And if I want to make my button to this right extent, that means we will use position property here. We can use position property here. I am giving my position as, I am including absolute as the value to our position property. And if I include some of my properties as top as 0 and left as 0, if I give a refresh over here, and it will be gone from here, and you can see the thing here like this. Okay, and we are setting the top property as 0 and left property as 0. That means we're gonna give some boundary properties to our particular button, right? And if I give something like, if I make use of this thing as bottom, right, bottom 0 left 0, if I give a refresh, see here the thing will be turned to the bottom of our page, and we are giving the bottom thing as 0 and left thing as 0. The point that you need to keep in mind is, when you give absolute positioning value, it will apply these properties as per your general view of our page. That means if you are scroll down this page to the bottom, and this positioned button will be gone with the content, because we are going to use the position properties with this extent, right, with this content. Okay, the position properties of the absolute positioning properties will be applied to the present view of our web page. If I give something like bottom right, if I give a refresh, it will be turned to the right of this general format view. Okay, when I giving this thing for this entire thing, it will be not coming with us because we are positioning this thing as the absolute value. Okay, this is the thing that we can keep in mind. And if we want to make this thing at the bottom of our right extent, for that we can make the changes in our body of this page. That means if you search our body in our HTML file, here the body we are giving center. Okay, id as center. Search the id attribute here. Okay, here is the id attribute. If I give position for this id attribute as relative, right? I am using here relative. If I give a refresh, okay, with relative to this position, it will be set right to the bottom 10 pixels and right 0. If I scroll down this page, you can see the button will be displayed over here because of the relative positioning of this entire body. That means we are made changes for this center id attribute, right? That center id attribute is within the body element. For this entire body, with relative to this entire body, we are giving the changes on this button as absolute positioning with bottom value as 10 pixels and right as 0. This is the general thing we can include. If I give right as 10 pixels over here, okay, you can also make changes like this. And this is the general thing about how to create buttons in our web page, and we're gonna use some positioning techniques that will be applied to your buttons and the every element in our web page, which gives you a better representation of your web page. Okay, and we will catch up in the next video. Thank you.